All right, I added a couple more things into the middle where I would say that he influenced my ability to open up, be accepting, and being present in a lot of ways just by the nature of who he was. Um, so when he died, I'm going to show this through this diagram. So again, I'm losing this whole side over here. And it was definitely one of the biggest losses I can remember earlier on in life because of how much we did share together and how he kind of was like a sibling for me. So we're losing this, but here's the powerful thing that you can kind of see, which is why I like the keeping this diagram here and using this, is when you lose that one big piece of this relationship, that we and us still remains. And I might kind of paint this in as something that is integrated, whether we like it or not in some ways. And so the beautiful part about it is we don't have a choice. This is how attachment and relationships work, is that we keep the spot. Actually, now that I think about it, this kind of becomes one, doesn't it? I'm going to kind of dot this in like this because I think in a lot of grief work there is integration work that's needed. A lot of theorists kind of point at that. Be it Freud talking about decathecting from a relationship, which is a little different than how I would, well, a lot different than how I would frame it now, but still kind of an important point, all the way to modern day theorists kind of looking at how do we integrate attachments into ourselves. And so this we, us, I'm not going to change because that's a part of who I am and what we kind of created together in the relationship. But I had to do work to kind of notice how I continue to carry Marley, how I continue to change, but also keep a lot of these things with me. And so a lot of these kind of pivotal memories that I have growing up, and a lot of these things that definitely have turned into values for me of being present, being adventurous, not taking myself too seriously, of the importance of being quiet, even though I put that as my characteristic. He absolutely shared in that. He was not a terribly loud dog. And so this is an uncomplicated relationship. I don't know why I struggled to get that out, is an uncomplicated relationship. And so it's a lot easier doing the integrating work when there's not complicated grief and loss here. I'll probably have to do something separately for complicated grief because this model still works for that. And I might need to do things that are more tailored to therapists working with grief, so I can kind of explain a little bit of how to work with this in kind of the therapy milieu. But again, here's the powerful pieces. And there's a lot of this piece right here that in our work, in our own grief, that we do need to take time to name out. Because a lot of times when we are deep in a grief process, or we have just freshly come off of this loss over here, it feels very much like we have two separate circles and we've lost our counterpart over here. And we can, sometimes this is idealization, but we can really speak to the loss over here, who that person was, what the place was, what the entity was, and have it on a pedestal, for better or for worse. And over time, we might start to add in additional important context to that person, to that place. And also, we have some internal work that we do over here where we have a similar process going on, but what we often don't really maybe name out is the relational part of grief, which is, again, the things that are shared that we take in. Now, I would say, kind of as a teaser for when I'm doing complicated grief work, there's going to be parts of the we and us that are painful, that are complicated, and not things that maybe we do want to internalize because they might not be healthy parts of a relationship. And maybe that's all the more reason to understand how, while we have this boundary here, we have ways where we can choose how we integrate things into ourselves. We can understand where we had to formulate maybe certain boundaries, and keeping those things, even though they're still impacting us and still within our circle, that we can understand where they're coming from and give them a name and give them space, where we don't have to accept certain parts of maybe painful messages that we have received, or other complicated parts of a relationship that maybe are not healthy for us to fully tie into ourselves. So again, with Marley, I got nothing but kind of positive regard from him, and as with most pets, I would assume, I had just a lot of affirmation, a lot of great memories. And so for me, I probably have completely knocked down that whole wall, and he has just become a big part of me. So I hope that seeing this model, seeing the picture, and how simple and how huge it can be when we are in that space of loss, how important this can be, because again, we get to map out how we carry these relationships, and that's, to me, one of the more important parts of grief. And it also lets us explore a lot of the pain, a lot of the passions that we share, a lot of the important parts of what makes us us, and how we are reflected ourselves in this. All right, I hope you enjoyed that and it made sense. I want to debrief and go over a few things. One, just to reiterate, that was an example of a simple grief for me, which means that that grief did not have trauma involved in it, and it was a simple relationship with a dog who's really meaningful to me. But typically dogs don't have a whole lot of complicated relationships. And so this looks different if there is trauma involved, or if it's a more dynamic human kind of relationship that does tend to have communication issues. The other thing I wanted to speak to is the characteristics that I noted down, the memories that I noted down. The way that I expand on this after mapping it out in this way is to understand how this person or myself carries this relationship into other relationships, or how I carry this into my own life with myself. And so it is getting back pieces of this relationship, or being with it in a really meaningful way, when I'm able to pick up on, man, this openness, this peace, this calm, this acceptance, this showing up does remind me of Marley, my Siberian Husky, and it does remind me of these times where we would just be, and the meaning that comes out of that, and how that translates to forming other relationships I have. And that's a sort of thing that we're looking for when we're supporting others too, is when do they feel this loss showing up, and the parts that are still with us, and how do we act on those in ways that are really meaningful. So again, I can expand on that a little bit more probably in other videos here or writings, and I look forward to hearing feedback.